as a tangent to all of these protests, we have what's going on in CHOP, the Capitol Hill Occupy protest in Seattle. Um, on Monday, a 16-year-old boy was killed and a 14-year-old was injured um, in a shooting. It was the fourth shooting in 9 days, and the fourth shooting in 10 days. And Mayor Jenny Durkin, the Seattle mayor, um, who, by the way, had the opportunity to break up these protests about a month or so ago. In these protests, this CHOP was centered around the East Precinct of the Seattle Police Department. The precinct was completely abandoned, and initially was established as CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. But the fact that she diminished the impact that this could have had on her city, or even other cities for that matter, by dismissing it as a summer of love. Now she's got two fatal shootings on her hands, and the last one, the first one being Lorenzo Anderson, the 19-year-old who was shot and killed at the edge of the protest area. I don't know what you can say to this. I mean, she's got blood on her hands, and obviously what she's doing is wrong, and there's zero accountability on her part, and it sounds like the people don't care about it. It's it's mind-boggling, really. Like, where, if this happened in a city where a Republican was mayor, people would be calling on that mayor to resign on a national level. Like, people are calling like Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, to resign for his handling of coronavirus, and he had things pretty well maintained until you had essentially people going out and about and protesting, people going to beaches. I mean, like, the beaches issue wasn't even that big. Things got really bad after the protests started happening. And obviously, correlation doesn't equal causation. We don't know for certain exactly where all of these outbreaks are happening in Florida, but it seems like people really want Ron DeSantis to go, and he arguably has done a better job of handling coronavirus than, say, Andrew Cuomo. In any event, instead of the focus being on Mayor Jenny Durkin and having a couple of deaths of two teenagers on her hands, all of this focus is on the St. Louis couple, who Mark and Patricia McCloskey, and they're under fire for essentially brandishing their firearms on their private property. And protesters essentially broke into a private street that was gated, and they kept essentially telling them that this is private property, you need to get out. Now, for the record, their trigger discipline was horrible. Mark McCloskey didn't have the safety on. The safety was off. And then Patricia McCloskey looks like she's never held a handgun before, had her finger essentially resting right on the trigger. That's how you get someone killed or badly wounded. And she was pointing that thing everywhere. It's like she's thinking she's some sort of gangbanger. But be that as it may, it was their private property. They were well within their right to defend it. And the fact that they brandished their firearms, things de-escalated. Those protesters left. And you could imagine that if they came out of their homes without any firearms, in spite of whatever gun safety class they didn't take, you can imagine that they could have experienced a break-in. And while people were saying that they are peaceful protesters, why'd they break into a private street? What are they trying to get across? They get in the face of these people, these wealthy elite in St. Louis. Are they going to really change any minds? Especially if they're like protesting right outside their door. I mean, the answer is obviously no. You're not going to change any minds by doing that. And you're naive if you think that you are going to change any minds by doing that. Of course, you got to engage the people who don't agree with you, but the McCloskeys said that they support the protests. They say they said outright, basically, Black Lives Matter, and they are simply protecting their private property. And it's the same thing that a storefront owner would do. Do they all of a sudden, if it's say like a business owner of color, if they were black, if they were Arab, if they were Sikh, if they were Asian, like the rooftop Koreans in the L.A. riots in '92, do they not? Do they? Are they like trying to stop the movement and not hold police accountable for their actions, particularly when it comes to members of the black community? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that their livelihoods are at stake, and they know that there are bad faith actors everywhere, and they hide amongst them. They hide amongst these peaceful protesters. I mean, we saw it with these Boogaloo boys in Oakland. Uh, Two guys, one of which shot and killed a federal law enforcement officer outside of a federal building, as well as wounded his colleague. And he was arrested and tried with murder. And essentially, their reasoning was that they wanted to go kill cops and hide amongst these peaceful protesters. That doesn't mean that members of Black Lives Matter or these protests were actually trying to kill cops, but you can imagine that it is a uh, pretty good cloak to sort of hide amongst these protesters and then say open fire on a police officer or an innocent bystander, or beat the shit out of a business owner, or loot their business. I mean, it's not hard to think about these things happening. Of course, people's lives matter. Black lives matter. That is like, when people say all lives matter, they're just being antagonistic dicks. And I don't think they actually believe. I think there is a contingent within this all lives matter movement who believe that, yes, of course, black lives do matter. But they're saying all lives matter because they don't want their they don't want to be like become a tool of politicization. So you see like Mike Pence saying all lives matter. Like, come on, man. It's just too much, man.